Welcome to Raving Ryan. I'm your host, Ryan Anastasio. Today I have a very special guest, Congresswoman from Connecticut's 5th District, Jahana Hayes. Congresswoman, how are you? Thanks for coming on.
Good morning, Ryan. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, so you grew up in Waterbury and you lived in Connecticut your whole life, and you grew up in a lower income area, and you grew up in public housing. Can you tell us a little about your early life and especially what it was like growing up in Waterbury?
Well, my whole family was from Waterbury. I've spent the majority of my life there, so I am really deeply invested in this community. Yes, I did grow up in public housing. All my education was in Waterbury. And what that taught me was the sense of community. I grew up in a community where we had after-school programs and summer programs, and the church was active, and local civic centers were active. So I really learned very early on that all of these different people invest into the lives of their community, not just their own family. So I think that really has given me the foundation to do the work that I'm doing.
Yeah, and you eventually became a teacher. Did you always know you wanted to be a teacher?
Absolutely. It's funny, when I was National Teacher of the Year, people would ask me, at what point did you know you want to be a teacher, or who's the teacher that inspired you? And I was just one of those people who always knew. I was born knowing. I always played school. It was everything I aspired to be.
Yeah, and you taught at Kennedy High School. Did you attend Kennedy High School?
No, Crosby.
What was the experience like teaching at Kennedy High School? You taught there for many years. You taught American government.
Well, I taught U.S. history, world history, comparative government, geography, and then I created an African American history course. So I had 5 preps, and what was amazing about Kennedy is a diverse student body, a robust student body. So I really learned, as I'm teaching history, all of my students brought something different to the conversation. When you're teaching about, world history and the Greeks, and you have a large Albanian population in your class, and you have kids who say, my family is from this island, and they bring their perspective, and their parents are making food that go along with the lesson. It really teaches you about the importance of people in all of these stories. So Kennedy High School, and even the city of Waterbury, we have, I think we're up to 140 different languages. We have this huge event called The Gathering, and you really see, you have all of these ethnic communities that are really representative of where our country is.
Yeah, in 2016, you were thrust into the national spotlight when you were named National Teacher of the Year. You had a reception with President Obama. And what was that experience like, and were you surprised when you were named National Teacher of the Year?
I was absolutely surprised. First of all, I was the first Waterbury Public School teacher to ever be named Connecticut Teacher of the Year, so that was already a big deal in the community. And then for my name to go in, and the National Teacher of the Year program is huge. You have all 50 states, all of the U.S. territories, 3.5 million public school educators are eligible for the honor, and they only select one every year. But what I learned from that experience, a couple things. First of all, I had only experienced education through the lens of a classroom teacher. As the National Teacher of the Year, I came out of the classroom and went on a sabbatical, and it was supposed to be a year, but there was a lot of momentum, the change in leadership. So my year lasted about 18 months. So I traveled all over the world. I traveled to almost every state, and I looked at education from the policymaking perspective, through nonprofit agencies, through textbook companies, through educator preparation programs. So I really saw that you had all of these other people who were equally as passionate about the profession and about student outcomes as I was, but they were just advocating from a different perspective. And I really was able to see how all of these pieces fit together, because when you're in the classroom, you think teachers know everything about education or what students need, but there are all of these other people working outside of the classroom. And I really was able to see that and have an authentic voice in that conversation, and that has really helped me in the work I'm doing in Congress, because you realize everybody's not supposed to know everything. Yeah. Everybody brings something different to the conversation. But I've also been able to interact with education policymakers and textbook companies and people who do after school and safety programs and all of these things that help me do the work that I did. I spent almost 2 years working with these people.
Yeah, and I'm sure you never thought you'd be a member of Congress. The 5th Congressional District was held by Elizabeth Esty, who was seen as someone that would hold that seat for a long time until the scandal with her Chief of Staff, Tony Baker. I know Senator Chris Murphy approached you. I know you were hesitant at first.
Yes. I never thought about being an elected official. I mean, I've been asked before to run for Board of Ed, to do different things, and I've always said no because I felt like I was doing the best good I could in the classroom. But I think it really started me on this trajectory during my year of service as Teacher of the Year, because you really realize, advocacy happens from so many different perspectives, and there was teacher voice that was missing. When Congresswoman Esty made the decision to step down, and Chris Murphy was the first person to reach out to me and say, I really think you should consider this. I didn't see a space for me in this. I'd never run. I didn't have a network, a political network. I wasn't sure I could raise the money. People didn't know who I was in that arena. I mean, between educators and teachers, and from traveling around the country as National Teacher of the Year, I was known in that way, but not in a political way. Yeah. So I didn't think I could do it. I didn't think that people were ready for that. And I think that's the lesson that I've learned from this campaign, and the lesson that I see that many young people, many women, many young girls of color are taking from my victory, that just because you haven't seen it before, or just because there isn't a path or a blueprint, doesn't mean it can't be done.
Yeah, so you ran and you won the primary and then you won the general election. And it really is in a very diverse district. You have the Northwest Hills and you have places like Waterbury and Danbury. So you get down to Congress and you walk into orientation. What was that experience like?
Well, I think Connecticut, first of all, I think our state is such a rich example of what this country is. In my district especially, I have, like you said, some of these urban centers, some of these farming communities, the Northwest Hills. We have the largest equity gap here, where we have the wealthiest and the poorest people who live in this country. Who live in this state. But my campaign and what I saw, so even before I got to orientation, for the swearing in, there was a bus that went to Washington. And the bus wasn't just people from Waterbury. It was folks from Cornwall Bridge. It was people from Kent, people from Southbury. So you had all of these diverse and dynamic and people from different backgrounds coming together because they believed in the same cause. And I talked to people who have been at this for a long time, and they said that they've never really seen quite that group of people come together. So I come from a profession where you rely on building relationships, where you rely on seeing other people's perspectives and really respecting and acknowledging other people's perspectives. So that really has served me well. So I came into this Congress in much the same way. This dynamic, diverse class of people with different backgrounds, coming from different communities, different experiences. And I hope nothing about it changes, because I really see in a real and authentic way that we're elevating the conversations that are already happening in our communities and bringing our perspectives with fidelity, not secondhand knowledge, but all of us bring something very personal to this Congress.
And you made history when you were elected. You became the first African-American woman to serve in Congress from Connecticut, and you were part of the largest group of women ever to serve in Congress. What is it like to be a part of that kind of history?
I realize today that it's so much bigger than me. I had never even thought about being the first African-American woman. I didn't even realize it. It's not something that I really thought about. So when I saw it in print the first time, it kind of took my breath away. But I just think that there are so many probably young people who had aspirations to go into politics but thought, I'll never be able to do it. So when I get letters all the time. I have parents reach out to me. I have young people reach out to me, and not just African Americans, people from different groups who have not yet seen themselves represented, who say, through you, I see me, and I recognize that I too can do this. So I think as a state, we're so much better off for it. I think it really is more indicative of who we are, because we are just a diverse collection of people with different backgrounds and experiences, and that needs to be represented at the federal level.
Yeah, and I want to move into some of the issues, and we're taping this interview on Friday, and we just woke up to the news from New Zealand where 49 people were killed. Yesterday you had a bill that you talked about not allowing to arm teachers. What do you make about the news in New Zealand? Can you talk a little bit about that bill that you introduced?
So my bill was prohibiting the use of, it's HR 231, it's keeping guns out of classrooms, and it's meant to prohibit the use of federal funds to arm teachers. So in the Every Student Succeeds Act, there's some money that was set aside for school safety, and the interpretation of that, what does that mean? And as a teacher, I know that there are so many other resources that our schools and our kids need. Preventative measures, social workers, supplies, books, materials, things that they need to set them up for success. I don't want to see those funds used to arm teachers. And then I keep hearing this as a recurring conversation as we're doing the school infrastructure bill or different areas where we're trying to appropriate money to improve student outcomes. And there's always that lingering uncertainty, can this money be used to arm teachers? I don't think it's appropriate.
Do you think your bill will pass the House? I think it will probably pass the House, but do you think it will pass the Senate?
You know what? I think that everything is timing, and I think we are at this inflection point in history where people are saying, you know what, we have to address this. If you think 6 years ago after Sandy Hook, there was no action taken, and now we're at a place where we passed HR 8, HR 1112 to universal background checks, the Charleston loophole provision. You know, I just presented a bill on the floor. You see the students walking out. Dick's Sporting Goods just decided they weren't going to sell a particular brand of guns. You see the Supreme Court in Connecticut. So we went from no action to gradually gaining momentum, and I'm very optimistic because I think, you know, my bill is just to prohibit the use of federal funds. I think that there's still some room for communities to have those conversations about, you know, what they see as their safety needs, but we should not be taking funds away from students in order to do that.
Yeah, you mentioned the Connecticut Supreme Court ruling, and now that's allowing some Sandy Hook families to sue the gun makers. Do you think that's right, and do you think we should be holding the gun maker responsible?
I think it is right. I think they should have their day in court. You know, I'm not litigating the case.
The person that sold the gun.
I'm not litigating the case, but there needs to be a day in court. Both sides need to be able to present their evidence to a court and let the courts decide. But this idea that you are above reproach. Yeah. You know, no, I don't think any company in the industry is above reproach. So let them have their day in court.
Yeah, I want to move into talk about health care, and a lot of people talk about Medicare for all. You've come out as a supporter for this, and there hasn't been a lot of details about this. A lot of people saying we can't really pay for this. We have a $22 trillion federal deficit right now. So what do you make of Medicare for all?
Well, I mean, I ran on a platform of Medicare for All. I was very open, honest, and transparent about it, and there is a lot of support for programs like Medicare for All. I think we're in a country where everyone deserves health care, and we have to figure that out. And when we talk about the deficit, you know, I say this the tax cuts that were presented, it does not benefit the majority of American people.
Do you want to repeal the tax cut?
I think we should. I think we need to open up, and there are some places where we can get funding. You know, when you look at the budget that was just released, when we talk about the deficit, it takes it from over $1 billion. You know, it really continues to...
It's gone out of control in the past 2 years.
It's going out of control. So I think our budgets reflect our values. And if we can find money to do all these other things, we need to, in a real way, look at how are we going to ensure health care for the future of Americans. And this idea that it costs too much and we can't pay for it, yet we're increasing budgets on all these other things, and the deficit is growing bigger and bigger. You know, we're not reducing deficit right now, we're growing deficit. So where are we using money for other things? You know, we have a tax bill that's not doing what it was intended to do.
Yes, there's two different sides of this Medicare for all issue. Some people, some Democrats are saying we should outlaw private insurance, and some are saying we should still allow private insurance. Where are you on that issue?
I think people need the choice. I'm not one of those, you know, absolute, this is my line in the sand, and we should outlaw private insurance, especially from a state like Connecticut. But there should not be this disproportionate windfall where insurance companies are seeing huge profits and less people are being insured. There has to be a balance. I think that for some people, if I have the choice and I like my insurance company and I want to keep it, I should be able to. But there should also be ways and means for people to obtain insurance in other ways. And I think Medicare for All will help to do that.
Do you think this is something that's going to happen in the next decade?
I hope so. I'm hopeful.
Yeah, another big issue is climate change, and your colleague in the House, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Senator Ed Markey from Massachusetts, they introduced the Green New Deal, and it's a lot of people have gone after and say, like, this is radical and this can't happen. What do you make of the Green New Deal?
It is. It is. I mean, it's a resolution, and I'm a person who supported the Green New Deal.
You're saying it is radical?
I think it is radical. But the thing is, I don't think it's intended to move through as it's presented. I think it's intended to put a marker on the idea that climate change is an issue. And we have to look at this and the way it affects our communities, especially our most marginalized communities. And not only look at it, we have to have a plan to take action. When you look at it, I mean, it's everything thrown in. So the way And just in my short time in Congress, you see something comes and then you go through committee, you go through markup, there's this opportunity for people to add things, to take things away. I'm realistic. I know that this, as it's written, will not pass through committee, will not hit the floor. But I also know that it has forced us to sit up and say we need to have a real and honest conversation.
It's creating a national conversation.
It really is, and that hasn't happened. When you think about, I remember being in the classroom showing my students an inconvenient truth when Al Gore was talking about climate change, and then Barack Obama brought it up, and then when Bernie Sanders first introduced it, people didn't even want to talk about it. We are having a national conversation, and even though people are saying different things, we're acknowledging that we have to say something and we have to do something. And I think that's what this resolution does.
Do you think anything like this could actually pass when there's some Republican members of Congress that don't even believe climate change is caused by humans?
Well, I think that's the wonderful thing about Congress. There's 435 members in the House and another 100 in the Senate. It's not, you have all of these perspectives and all of these backgrounds, and we bring the voices of the people in our community. And I think if communities really start to elevate these conversations, the people in my district care about the climate. The people in my district, that was one of their concerns when I was on the campaign trail. I heard it over and over and over again. So I have a responsibility to them to bring their voices forward. I hope my colleagues both on the Republican side and the Democratic side share that same sense of responsibility to say, if you come from a community in a district where everyone in your district is saying, we don't believe climate change is real, then maybe you're the person who goes in and takes a vote in that way. But I hope people vote the conscience of their communities.
Yeah, and it's crazy. You just got elected, but they're already talking about 2020, and it's going to be an interesting presidential election. We're going to have a lot of candidates. Yesterday, Beto O'Rourke announced he was running. You haven't officially endorsed anyone, but you've talked about Kamala Harris, who I know she endorsed you in the election. Do you think she'd be? Are you going to endorse her eventually? You think?
I like Kamala Harris. I've said that. I think she's very smart. I think the primary season does just that. It gives us the opportunity to vet people, to flesh people out, to hear what they have to say on different issues, and really see them in a different arena, because now, no matter what you did in your community or what you did in your previous job, can that skill set transfer to the office of the president? So I'm very excited about all of these Democratic candidates. I am hopeful that after the primary, one person emerges as the nominee and people just get behind them and we start to do the work of, moving an agenda forward. But I like her. I like her. But, there's different things. And this idea that, it's just like everything else, whether it be legislation, whether it be joining a caucus. It's like you may like one thing about someone, but you like one thing about someone else. Yeah. There is no purity test here.
Let the process play out.
Absolutely. So I'm excited about the process.
Yeah. You excited that maybe Joe Biden might come in? He had a rally with you
yes.
in the campaign.
I am. Also, I think Joe Biden has been a great leader. But this idea...
Some people are saying he's too old. He would be 79 years old on Inauguration Day. Think that might be an issue?
I don't think so. To think that just because someone is young that they can do we see it now in the caucus. That was the criticism against Nancy Pelosi. And she has more, energy, more stamina, more drive than any young person I know. She's at the breakfast meeting. She's at the midnight prayer. Like, she's everywhere.
I want to finish up with some personal questions. I know your schedule is very hectic. You're you're going between Washington, D.C. and the district, and when you're in the Congress from Connecticut, you're always expected back in the district. It's not like if you live in California, where you can only come back once in a while. What is your daily schedule like, and how are you able to remain sane?
Well, I come home whenever we don't have votes, so I'm only in Washington when I have to be in Washington. I don't extend the time there. My schedule, so we're just around 60 days now, and this has been, as you know, the craziest induction. It was baptism by fire. So the first...
You came in with the shutdown.
Came in with the shutdown. The first 6 weeks we had a government shutdown, so there was a tremendous struggle to even get 2 offices up and running because, it's not like you just get a U-Haul and move furniture. You have government contracts. Everything has to be inventoried. We had a month without telephones, about 6 weeks without internet. So my office was running with cell phones and hotspots. We actually just got our cable connection last week.
I remember I called, there's no voicemail.
Yeah, but there's not, because everything funnels through Washington, and we came in through the shutdown. Our first district work week was canceled because they wanted us in Washington working. So really, just getting started has been a challenge. So the thing that I miss most is during the campaign, you have so much personal connection with people. And again, I come from a background built on relationship building. So really now, trying to get as many meetings as I can in with different people who are elected officials around the state. So when I'm home, I have anywhere from, some days I go from 7 in the morning till 7 at night with meeting, event, different things. And then there's a fine balance between sharing out your information, listening and receiving other people's information, doing the ceremonial side of the job, which is showing up at different events. And for me, again, being the first African-American woman, there's a lot of asks of, can you come and speak to our school or these students, or there's a lot of historical markers that are being put down. Yeah. So I have a very hectic schedule. I mean, time is my most precious commodity, even on fly-out days. So typically I fly out on Monday afternoon, do 3 or 4 events in the morning before I fly out. Yeah. Get to Washington, do 2 events there or 2 meetings or whatever there before the first vote, and go until 9, 10 o'clock at night, and then spend a couple hours up at night just reading through the briefs and the background and the testimony. So it definitely is a time challenge.
Yeah, I know you probably don't have as much time for hobbies now, but do you have any hobbies?
I bake. I'm a huge baker, which I used to do a lot of before this part of my life happened. And not really a hobby, but I'm passionate about community service, passionate about service. I'm a person who did several service projects a month with different organizations, and I miss that. So my team is trying to build that into the work that I do, as a group, going out and maybe doing Habitat for Humanity, or partnering with some of my volunteers or some schools to continue that work, because it's such a huge part of who I am. So separate and apart from service. I mean, separate and apart from this job. So, for instance, I'm going to be at a food pantry helping to pass out food, and not in a political capacity, not just for a photo, but really staying the whole time it's open, because that's what refills my cup. And there's a huge void. So I have to be intentional about making time for it.
Yeah, I want to finish up with a very difficult question. I'm sure you know, Connecticut has a lot of great pizza places. Do you have a favorite in the state?
I do.
What is it?
Dominic and Pia.
Dominic and Pia.
Yes, and I'm willing to take the hits for it, but it's 50-year-old business in downtown Waterbury.
That's not what most politicians won't say. That's very bold coming out like that.
Willing to take the hits for it. It is a staple in my community. The same family has run it for 50 years. They know the faces of everyone in our community. People travel home. Nobody comes back home to visit without going to say hello to Pia, ordering a pie, and I'll take it.
Yeah. All right, well, go to Dominic and Pia's. Thank you for watching. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to go to my website, ravingryan.com. Go follow Congresswoman Hayes on Facebook, Twitter, and thank you for watching. Reporting for Raving Ryan, I'm Ron Anastasio.